Hey, there's two David Minkies.
Hello,
Is that Steve?
this is me. Can you hear me?
I
Hey,
can
Can you
hear
hear
Steve,
me,
you.
so I
Matt?
don't
I can
need
hear
to
you. Who is
text
it?
you the number.
You're not hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I can hear you loud.
Okay.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep.
Too many access codes and stuff.
I kind of just
I like
shot
those.
you everything.
I like those. When you just call in and you hit the thing on the calendar and it just goes there.
Yeah. Did you have to enter the access code on the phone too?
Yeah, yeah.
I thought you'd have to. Yeah.
Who else is on the call so far?
Ryan, Jeff, Debbie, David Minky, Josh Moore, you and I.
All right.
Hey, Steve, I just seen you text me the call-in number,
Yeah.
so apparently you don't need it, huh?
I got it.
Okay, that sounds good.
I packed. I took all that stuff. Well, I put it in the camper and I'm in the truck, so figured it's easier just to text you guys. I'm getting pretty good at texting and driving because it's got that thing where you can just talk into the phone and it texts somebody.
Be careful what you're admitting to.
Well, you can talk. You don't have to push any buttons. You just talk.
Okay.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. Does it do voice recognition, you mean?
Yeah, but well, you got to tell it. You got to tell it who you want to text, and then I think you got to push yes, send this text. Because you say something and then it says it back to you. Are you ready to send it? No. And then you say yes or no.
Oh, okay.
I had to text my boys that hunt my land because they've been trying to find the geese. Well, this morning at dark 30, I could hear them landing in my field.
Goose hunting.
I texted them. I said, "They're there, boys."
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, there's some high school kids. They're just nuts about hunting. They get up at, they'll be up tomorrow morning at 3:30, I bet, and everything's laid out in that field long before daylight. Kind of neat, Matt, when you know their grandpas and I hunted with some of their grandpas, know their dads, kind of passed on that hunting gene got passed on.
Yeah. Kind of a cool story though.
Yeah, it's fun. And they do such a nice. They came and visited me a month ago because they knew I had wheat there. I mean, they saw the wheat field, and they're smart enough to know, hey, that's going to come off of there one of these days. But the geese have, I expected they would have showed up the day we combined, but this is the first day I've seen them. It's been combined for 3 weeks at least.
How many of them came up there? Were they nervous when they asked you for permission, or did they know you pretty well?
Yeah, you know, they're kids. They kind of know me, but they don't really know me. So
Yeah.
they're coming with their heads kind of, and I go, "Hey, boys, you looking for a place to hunt?" Boy, their eyes lit up. Oh, yeah. Come up on the deck.
No. So you broke the ice for them, took a little pressure off.
I broke the ice. I felt sorry for them. I knew what they were there for.
They're all good kids.
But they've come back a couple of times to check on me and make sure everything was still okay. The geese came in there. I said, "Yeah, you got her, boys."
Well, I have 9:00. So
All right.
is everybody here, David? I can't see the whole list on my.
I'm back.
Okay, so I think
I had not heard from John. Oh, now I just got an email. He says he's having trouble getting on. I'm going to give him a call. Or Ryan, do you want to give him a call? That would be more productive.
Is he old enough to
That's
make
fine.
it
I
up?
can scoot over there too.
we can wait a little bit.
See, I didn't think.
Hi, Rod.
How you doing?
Good.
Can you hear me all right? Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yep.
We had a little technical difficulty this morning, so Ryan helped me out.
Is that you, Rodney?
Yes, it is. How you doing, Steve?
All right. Pretty darn good.
Good, good.
John was going to be connecting here in just a minute. He got everything
Okay.
straightened out. So
Thanks, Ryan.
Well, I think we've all learned that the most unbelievable part of the whole Star Trek saga was their universal video conferencing with every alien life form without any issues.
I know my dad would be absolutely amazed at this process. He's no longer here with us, but he would be impressed.
My father-in-law was amazed at the iPhones and stuff. He knew there was something more to it, but he always used to say, "Ask that little box something." How did they get all that information in there?
Is he close, Ryan, or?
He said he was joining. I can give him another call here quick.
Hey, here we go. I see him. His name.
Yep, I'm here now.
All right.
Okay. Well, let's call the meeting to order. This is the Pine County Board Special Budget Committee meeting, September 9th, 2020, and the time is 9:06. Before I get started, I just have a couple announcements. The chair is on the highway somewhere in the Dakotas, and the vice chair is manning his store solo, so I'm going to chair for both of them because they probably have to do things whenever it happens. So, and you know, 20-01, declaring a peacetime emergency and coordinating Minnesota's strategy to protect Minnesotans from COVID-19. On March 24th, 2020, the Pine County Board of Commissioners declared a local emergency for Pine County. Based on these conditions, the chair of the Pine County Board of Commissioners has determined that the requirements of Minnesota Statute 13D as in David, .021 subdivision 1 have been met, and it is not practical or prudent for all members of the county board to meet in person. The public is invited to join the meeting remotely by phone. Call 1-650-215-5226, and the rest, all that information is on the county website. So we'll call the meeting to order and we'll rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, on the agenda, if there's no additions or corrections, on the agenda we have department budget presentations of Sheriff Department Jeff Nelson, Administration David Minky, and then we'll have some general budget discussion and then some additional meeting discussion if they're needed, and always thinking we have to have our levy adopted by September 30th. So with that being said, I'll look for an approval of the agenda.
Steve will move it.
Okay,
Moore will second it.
motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
All right.
Let's call the roll. Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner Ludwig, is Commissioner Chafee excused absence?
I do not know.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
Commissioner Chafee should be an excused absence.
Okay, thank you. We'll start with District 4, Commissioner Mickret.
Aye.
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
District 1, Chair Holland.
Yes.
District 2, Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, then now we'll move on with the presentations, and Sheriff Jeff Nelson, you're up first.
I think in talking to Rod, I think he'll go first for the jail, if that's okay.
That's fine.
All right.
Morning, everyone. So we sent in a proposed budget, and since then kind of sharpened the pencil a little bit and made some changes. But I wanted to start with, I have just a couple slides. So if I can do this here. Okay. I suppose, can you see that at all, or?
Not yet, Rod.
Not
No.
yet? Okay.
No.
Then I have to hit the share, right, Ryan?
Yep.
And why am I not finding it? Oh, here we go again. Sorry about this. How do I do the share? Where's that at, Ryan?
It's just on the bottom next to your stop video.
Oh, got it. All right, share. And do I do this one here? Screen one. Okay.
There we go.
Okay. Sounds good. So I don't want to bore you with a whole bunch of with numbers, but this is the initial budget that we proposed, and it's not just the jail, but it's the jail, court security, and it's the STS crew. And then at the bottom of this sheet, I have a combined. I think it's important that we look at all three of them as I made some adjustments. And I'll show you those adjustments here in the next couple slides. But in overall, for the county jail, we proposed 11.4% increase. The court security was 6.7. The STS crew was 5.9, and overall was an 11.3% increase. So the next slide, this is just kind of a summary of that initial budget proposal. One key factor you'll see here is jail revenue is down 170,000. That's what's expected, and with that, the wages were up 6%, benefits were up 12.5%, and as far as operational, and that's everything else. That's from the linens and laundry and food and medical and just operational. We presented a 1.7% increase initially. So the overall would have been that 11.3 or 467,000, 468 almost $1,000 increase. At any time, if anybody has any questions, just pipe in. Jail revenue, I'm going to hit that one. So that was a big one. We're expecting to be down approximately $170,000+ the biggest piece was the boarding revenue, down $150,000 from the Minnesota Department of Corrections. Expecting a drastic reduction in the number of release violators being housed at the county facilities. But other things that are affected are our Huber law charges. They're down. I'm saying down 5,000. It could be more depending on the pandemic situation. Because currently we have nobody going out on Huber work release, and we have nobody going out on STS during this. And that's due to housing capabilities that we just don't have during this pandemic time. Also, transportation reimbursements from the state and from HHS are zero right now. They virtually stopped. We have no transport going on that we would get any reimbursements from. And then drug testing and fingerprints were down. We expect those to be down too. One thing with that is we have resumed our civil fingerprinting. I know it's a small piece, but we were back, I want to say we were back in the dark ages. We were one of the only counties that still did ink prints. We went to electronic prints with the COVID, but we wanted to get there anyway, so we don't have to try and sanitize an ink pad. So we put these the electronic in. It's been running, so we opened that up, and we're getting a lot of people in for doing civil prints from all over. I mean, we're getting them from over north. I mean, all over Minnesota and even from Wisconsin. And these are the civil prints but that's a little something. And we're going to be addressing those fees for next year also. And I already spoke with Kelly on that. Any questions on that? I know the revenue piece it was a big piece in balancing our budget, and with that being down, any questions in that area? Okay. So jail expenditures, these are some changes that we implemented, and I already sent those off to Kelly, and I'll show those in our revised budget. But in operational, we adjusted our medical services. We had a lot of efficiencies put into play when we went with men's medical services. So we reduced the initial proposal by $11,500, and now we're proposing I'm going to reduce it another $16,800. So that's a big piece. We're able to provide a better medical service and with a reduced price. One key factor there is Nystrom and Associates was our mental health provider, and we terminated the contract with them. Kind of the jury's out on that to see if that was a real good move or not, because Nystrom did an excellent job for us, but they were very expensive. And so now MEND provides that service via video. So when we need the mental health services, we're going to be trying that out. Just to put it in perspective, how expensive Nystrom was, we were paying them for 4.5 hours every other week at $251 an hour, and that included their drive time. So we were paying them drive time to come here and back and forth. It was a need we had to get into because we lost our mental health provider, Sue Mans, in the past. She passed away, and so we were under the gun. We got that. They provided great service, but now we've moved on and we're trying to save ourselves some money. So we were, then the next thing is food and beverage. That's really dependent on our average daily population. And with it being down right now, we expect it to be down. It could rise quite a bit, but you know, I have a formula we put together to try and do a median in there. And the more meals we serve, the reduced price it is. So we kind of calculated out that we could reduce that number by, as you see, $7,981, and I just did that just for rounding purposes, so that we get it at an even $280,000. The rest are kind of small, but those small things kind of add up. You know, will be conferences and training, uniforms for staff uniforms. Kelly and I are working on a couple things with that. Anyway, we're waiting for some information. Prisoner clothing, office supplies, building maintenance supplies, the kind of the boring stuff. But overall, then in our operational, we're able to reduce that by $40,000, almost $41,000. Any questions in that area? As an overall, I want to look at everything right now: jail, court security, and STS. And you'll see the first one there, and this is really kind of a tough reality, but we do need to have a conversation. I don't have a real proposal at this point, but we do need to look at the future of STS program for the sheriff's office. Right now, we have zero benefit as the sheriff, paying out $88,275 would be the expected payout next year's budget, and with expenses met. So over the last couple of years, we briefly discussed, I know, the future of the STS program. The STS program was originally designed as a program under the sheriff for nonviolent offenders to do community work for local nonprofit organizations and unscheduled work for government agencies that without the STS would not get done. Pre-COVID, before the COVID, STS crews were getting smaller and smaller, and sometimes we had no participants. Since the pandemic, the STS crew has been shut down, and we have 0 going out. So with the lawn mowing, I'm going to expect snow shoveling in the winter time that we would help supplement with the STS crew. And there's 0 community projects going on. I shouldn't say 0. I mean, Brock tries the best he can to get things done, but he's a one-man show, and most of it is dedicated to lawn mowing and some maintenance. And we're paying $88,275 out of that for the county. The county gets benefit. The sheriff's office isn't getting a benefit out of that. It's not as easy as getting rid of $88,000 though, because those things do need to be done, and there'll be a cost to that. So that's part of the discussion. I'm gonna move to that, and then we can come back to the STS. Court security officer, we have an officer right now that's currently out on leave, and we're gonna plan on delaying filling that position. So that's a reduction in wage and benefit of $29,000. And then also in our court security, we have a jail matron position, which is a non-union position. Matt, you probably know who that is, but used very limited. That's on like an extended transport, which transports are virtually down to nothing right now. And maybe a call in if we needed a cat search in that. Right now, there's 0 hours going out on that, and with the future of transport looking like that's going to be reduced, we doubt that position is going to get very many hours at all. So I reduced those hours quite a bit with a savings of $23,000 for next year's budget. So overall, total wage and benefit change, that would be including that STS program, the $140,259 with that. I guess I would ask, I mean, I'll go through this here. This is applying that STS change in there. And David, I don't know how we would want to proceed in that area of discussion, maybe at a later time or what, but maybe I'll let you guide me on what that discussion looks like.
David and Rod, I appreciate all, Mr. Chair, if I could, but I guess I started anyway. But anyway, I appreciate all the work you're doing here. I do have some questions about the STS. I love that program. Is it something that we can blink off for a while because of non-participation? Absorb Brock back into the jail staff, and then at such time if our numbers increase, so we don't destroy the. I guess what I wouldn't want to do is destroy the program. I'm not ready to throw it down the toilet, but you know, if it takes a year or 2 to get there, is there a way to do that?
Well, absolutely. You know, as everyone knows that's just been on the personnel committee, we have open positions in the jail, and you know, he would have to go through some training, but he'd be able to pick up there. And I know that would be basically his call. You know, if he would want to, would be there. And we could delay that or put that on, you know, suspension. But again, the thing is I know that for the county, they have to figure out who's going to do the lawn mowing. I don't think Pete can just pick that up. And then with winter coming, the snow shoveling, and then there's a lot of maintenance that he does too. I keep a somewhat of a record, but you know, cubicle changes, office maintenance, things like that, that would need to be absorbed somewhere. Any other questions in that area, or? No?
Well,
Okay.
that was nice. Good job, Rod. But so when
I have a couple. I just got a couple more things. That was that piece, and I want to share you with my proposed or whatever.
oh, that's what I'm gonna say. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so I'll continue. All right. So the summary of that whole budget change, that would be with the STS or whatever. If we didn't have that on the sheriff, that would bring our budget down to a $296,000 increase, 6.98%. And I sent that this year off to Kelly, and she made the changes, I believe, in operational, but not with the STS because that's for discussion. Another thing we looked at is just for information. This is just a factor to take a look at. What I did is I looked at the last 5 years of our actual wage payout for the jail. And that's all wage, benefits, overtime, everything. And what we, as you see here, I'm sorry, you can see this, right? 2015, 16, all right.
Yep.
We had a 91% actual payout in 15 and 16. But those were numbers that I picked that came from January. When I came on in 16, I asked for numbers in March. That gets us more realistic what their payout was. So you can kind of see what our average was about 92, 93%, with the last 2 years being around 94. If we applied a 95% payout or assumed that, that's about $179,000, $180,000 difference. That would put our actual increase at 116 or a 2.73% increase. Now I know that's tough to say. Well, let's just put the whole wage calculation together, and assume that we're going to be fully staffed, and we would love that. And if we were fully staffed, then we wouldn't have that 180. But to put things into context, in the last 13 years, just so that you understand this piece, we've been fully staffed all of 6 weeks. So I think it would be kind of safe to say we're not going to be fully staffed, but we've got a staffing plan in place that kind of handles that. So I don't want to go out and say 100% guarantee we're going to have that 180,000, but I can about guarantee we're going to have quite a bit of that. And I just want you to see that. And then another factor, I just wanted to throw this in, communications, that fund balance we started last year, we put 26,005 into that, and midway this year, as I calculated out, there's about 46 that would go into that. Now, I know there's a little spending that has to end, or that has to take place at the end of the year with that there, but I'm thinking we're going to be pretty close to that 100,000 mark. So if we have projects and we have things that come up, I know I got a steamer that's going bad in the kitchen area. We've got a couple of maintenance things. Those are things maybe we can use that fund balance for. And I guess I'd have to talk to Kelly on that. So we wouldn't be strapping ourselves so much that we have nowhere to go in the jail with that. And that's what I have. Any other questions or anything there?
So I want to understand your last two. Go forward one.
There.
So yeah, so the 115.92, is that what you're saying is your?
That 115.942 would be if we had only a 95% payout in our budgeted wage and benefits right now. So
Okay. Yeah.
Fully staffed minus the 95%. Yep.
So is that compared to the one above it at the 295.854? That was your projected? That slide before?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is our projection right here. If you look down on the bottom, it's the 6.98% combined jail, court security, and STS. And then if you look at the small one way at the bottom, if I applied that 179,000 to that budget, it puts us at a 2.73% actual.
So my question is what's your risk? Could you put a cushion of 1% under your 2.73 and be safer, or are you comfortable with the 2.73?
That would be, if we did the 2.73, it would be dedicating that we're only going to pay out 95% of the wage that we're budgeting right now. So then you would end up saying, well, we might as well take a couple positions in there and actually delay those billings. I think then we run a risk of now your overtime is going to go crazy, and on other areas that it's not going to be as efficient. You know, we try creative scheduling, trying to keep that scheduling down with the way or the staffing plan that we have right now.
Okay, thanks. I think we're gonna have to come back, or we'll deal with that when Mr. Swanson.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I
go
just
ahead.
want to comment on that. I think that's very creative, Rod, and I appreciate the work you did on that. And Kelly probably had her finger on that too a little bit. But if our historical payout is never going to be 100% of all of our budgeted people, then let's use that, because we have really tried to be realistic in our funding, and that really helps. I mean, it gives us a true picture, and then I appreciate that. I like that. Thank you.
So good.
Yeah, I agree. I just was wondering how tight it's gonna be.
Well, I mean, right, and I guess I'm going to use my buffer as that fund balance. I don't know how we can apply that. Kelly, maybe you can step in what we can use that for. But is that my cushion? And is you know, that's 100,000. I guess I'd be comfortable with that if we had to use that at the end of next year to balance. And actually, by the end of next year, that should grow again. A canteen and communications can grow really. Inmates love texting and they love their food. So it's what we can use it for.
And Mr. Chair, or Kelly, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to speak to that fund balance a little bit. So the statute revolving that fund balance is not very restrictive at all. I know, Rod, you and I have talked about this, that there's some DOC suggestions of what that fund balance should be used for. So there's not statutory, there's not statutory requirements as long as it goes back into the jail, but yet there is DOC suggestions, I guess you would call it, right, Rod?
Correct. They suggest that it goes towards benefit of inmates. So that's how loose that is. So, I mean, could you argue almost anything is the benefit of the inmates? Having great staff benefits the inmates.
And Mr. Chair, this is David. I was just going to comment a little bit on kind of the strategies of trying to balance a budget. The proposal that Rod has of trying to capture some of that excess that we typically have in the compensation piece, the choices really are going to come down to actual positions, right? We're going to make a conscious choice that says we're going to eliminate actual positions, and that will generate significant budget savings. We can try to capture all of the excess like Rod is doing and making realistic assumptions as best we can and saying, we know we're not going to hit 100% of expenditures, so let's back that out. It's another way of trying to factor in vacancy savings. And I think from previous years, you remember we've had conversations of, well, how do you budget for health insurance for a position that's vacant? Do you budget 100% of family, or do you budget some percentage of it knowing that not everyone will take family? And so we've used different techniques there as a way to manage the budget. And then the third choice is always the levy, right? That's the backstop that says if we can't find the savings and we don't want to make the cuts, then we have to find the money. And so there aren't going to be a lot of good choices. And I think at the end of the meeting today, we'll have some conversation of where we think we sit based on all of the requests and what the gap is going to be. But it's going to take some creativeness. The reason to think creatively this time around might be because we're in the midst of a pandemic. And so we don't know the duration of any of these events, right? It's different. It may be different than some of the other economic downturns we've seen, although it may not, right? We just don't know, but we do know that it is a rainy day And so it may be a good time to think about being a little creative, which increases risk, or perhaps spending a little bit of reserves in order to moderate the year to year. So thank you.
Say, David, one thing I want, you had mentioned the calculations for benefits, insurance going out when you have a vacant position. So I have 5 full-time vacant positions. And when we calculate that out, it's the max amount for insurance that's put into that calculation. So that does increase that. As a matter of fact, I think from our very initial one, we ended up losing one position, and that raised my budget. So just food spot.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for Rod? Okay, thanks, Rod. That was very, very well done.
Thank you.
A lot of work went in that one.
Rod, Mr. Chair, if I could just ask Rod a couple of
Go ahead.
more global questions, Rod. If you look at the pandemic, let's pretend the pandemic goes away, and our jail numbers, because we're doing different things, remain in the 50, 60 range. Are there opportunities to have, because we got generally the same amount of staff watching 60 people as we have if we got 110 in there. So
I get your question there, and that is a great question. Try to assume, what does that new future look like in the model of policing and who's being incarcerated in that. Currently, right now, and Matt asked this yesterday in personnel. I'm glad you brought that up. But currently, right now, we're running right around that 50 to 55 mark, and that's with the pandemic situation and us being able to house people in separate classifications. Prior to the COVID, we were really struggling with the DOC's recommendations, or not recommendations, their mandates and how we separate inmates. For example, somebody comes in on a 4th degree DWI and somebody comes in on manslaughter or murder charges. We don't put those people in the same place, the same housing unit. So we have to separate them. We get all your mental health issues, your medical issues, vulnerable, keep separate. It's called special management, and that umbrella is big. The design of the jail doesn't accommodate all those pieces, including SPS and tubers, which are considered minimum security. Right now, the reason they're not going outside the building is because we're using that minimum security area. So there's a lot of separation pieces. There's a lot of work going on right now that keeps the staffing level where it's at, because there's more and more people going in and out. Now, Mr. Hallen, I know you said, what does that future look like? Yes, if we go back to there's no COVID, and we don't have that separation, and our count stays at 50, we'll definitely have to revise our staffing plan at that time, and it would be reduced to some level. But it's not as easy as saying we cut our inmates in half. We go from 100 to 50, so it should take our staffing and go in half too. The calculation isn't there because we still have all those separation needs, and that takes staff to make those separation needs, to do proper calculations, classifications for those inmates. So I don't know if that answers your question. My forecast, and I don't know, I see Reese is on, and I think it is anybody's kind of guess, but how many people after COVID will be coming into jail? My understanding is there's a lot of people out there that are just kind of waiting. I don't know how many misdemeanors are really being processed through right now, other than here's your future court date and we'll address it then. Will any of them come to jail? Right now we are only boarding about 5, I think we're at, or 6 boarders. The rest are Pine County. You add those that are out there waiting to come in, we could be up in the 80, 90 real easy after COVID. So that was kind of a roundabout answer, but I wanted to kind of paint a picture there so you understand that.
Could I ask a follow-up, Ron?
I appreciate that answer, Rod. And I'll wait. I got one more question, but I'll wait till Matt.
Okay.
I'll wait.
Yeah, it's Matt. I have a follow-up, Rod, just because I can't remember. The rules of your ratio of staff to inmate or staff to bed or whatever it is, not, disregarding COVID.
Right.
What is it? Is it a statutory rule or is it just a policy suggestion thing by Department of Corrections?
It's depending on, there's two factors that come in. It depends on the classification of our facility. We're a class 3 facility. And under that, the ratio is 1 to 60. But that's in a housing unit. So if every person that comes in all classifies the same, then, that's male. Everybody was male. Everybody was classified general population, and they all got along. We put them in one pod. You could have 60 in there with one officer. It doesn't work that way. I mean, many times it's 1 to like an alpha unit, we might run 30 in that unit, and then beta, because that's a different classification, and then you got all your seg units in beta that are different classifications. But that one officer does run all those, and then you got your female pod, and then you got rover. We got a rover position that is able to assist and break those other units, and your sergeants and that too. So it's not as easy as just doing the math 1 to 60.
No, but is it statute or is it just a rule?
2911. It's 2911 rules, and that is by the Minnesota Department of Corrections, and that is a rule that we have to follow. That we have to follow that 2911, and that is written in there. And then that's a staffing plan too, to make sure that we have an approved staffing plan through the Minnesota Department of Corrections that can accommodate that 1 to 60 with us being a class 3 facility. There's a couple other things in play. As far as administration goes too, there's a count in there too with keeping our administration level the way it is. There's things, if we were to go back to a 40, like Steve mentioned, after COVID, and we don't have any more than 40, the entire staffing plan would have to be revised and rewritten, and that would reduce everything from administration to staffing in the jail. Myself, I don't see that, but you never know.
All right. Thank you so much, Rod. Thanks. Go, Steve.
Yeah, it all kind of relates here, Rod, but as we've had discussions at the AMC policy, our Blue Ribbon Committee, and other counties are going through the same thing we are, and yep. So jail reform kind of gets to the top of a lot of people's lists. I wouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people, and because a lot of county commissioners are saying, I don't feel any less safe than I did 6 months ago, and we got a lot less people in jail, and a lot of those people got kind of pushed over to probation instead of jail time. Are we sitting down locally with judges, probation, county attorney, and jail staff and sheriff and saying, is there another way to do this? Because locking them up for 90 days or 6 months or whatever, we've been doing that forever and they keep coming back. Is there another way to do business? Have you had those discussions?
I haven't been involved in those discussions. I think they're happening. Probation's trying to figure things out. I know I've had a couple conversations with some probation agents, state and local too, where they're like, hey, some of these people that are out on probation, they're revolving and they need to come to jail. And they do for a short time and then they're back out on the street. I don't have the perfect answer right now, and I think that takes a group, like you just said, Mr. Hallen, a group discussion to figure out what is that model. And I think that's a nationwide thing going on right now. What's the model of policing, including incarceration? And I think Terry mentioned this at a later meeting or an earlier meeting. about probation, how a lot's getting put on there, but the DOC hasn't really addressed what's the incarceration look like. What does incarceration look like for the future? They haven't really addressed that yet.
Yeah, and I just think we might have an opportunity right here, right now, because of what has happened with COVID, and might be given a little more leeway. I don't know, but we've got some really good thinkers in our county. I've seen you guys work on stuff, and maybe we can just lead the whole nation. And this really works in Pine County, and you know we've done some great things with that capstone program of that recent Terry and Becky from the East Central schools were working on, and maybe we can help write the book on doing things a different way and ended up with better results. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I make one more comment before we leave the jail?
Go ahead.
So, while we were sitting here, the end of August expenditure report came out. And so I just did some arithmetic on the jail personnel costs. And this year, using a straight line trend, we would be 90% expended in personnel costs. And so I think that really gives some legitimacy to the work that Rod did with trying to calculate the actual spend of the personnel costs versus the budget of that. And so that is an area where commissioners are interested in. We can probably make some progress.
One thing I want to add to that, and I guess I didn't put it in my slides, and I just thought of it right now, but I didn't just think of it right now. But one thing we implemented for the entire year of 2020, we actually started it midway in 2019, was we went to 12-hour shifts, and we've seen a tremendous difference in not just budget, but it's all some morale issues and scheduling things too, that I wanted to get a year under our belt, so 2020, before we can make a real decision. But we've seen some savings in that area in light of overtime payout and forced overtime on staff. Those 12-hour shifts have really covered the jail. We've had that power schedule where we had that power person in there that helped out quite a bit, and we see it to continue. We're gonna move forward with those 12-hour shifts, and with those 12 hours, and we're 5 full-timers down right now. We're actually able to weather that storm. It's not the best situation, but we're actually able to weather those. When we were back on the 8th, you really couldn't. Overtime, the last 5 years I ran that, we were way over in our overtime. 3 years, last year, we actually made budget on overtime right at the I think it was 60,000. And this year, if I'm looking at, when I look at my midway, we should be half. Well, now our open positions are quite a bit, 5. So you don't know that it's just made a big difference, and we saw it in our overtime budget. So if we can capture that, that would be great. And I think that's reflected in that 90% right now, what David just did for calculations. So
that was really good conversation and really good information for me.
Yeah, through the end of August, Todd is only at 38% on his overtime budget, and that's what, 67% of the year. So not a little over half, but certainly well managed.
Very good. Any further questions for Rod, or we'll move on? Okay, we'll move on to, thanks, Rod.
You bet. Thank you.
Yep. Jeff, I think you're up.
All right, so I'll talk first about the 201. I do not have slides because I don't know that I could get my screen to share and stuff. So I think Kelly sent out the latest revisions that we went through. So hopefully you guys all have that.
Well, I can share. I'll share.
Oh, that's better yet. So unfortunately, I don't have any big areas of savings, and a majority of my increase is personnel and keeping staffing at the level it is. I'm not suggesting any changes in the sheriff patrol area or the records area, other than going to be asking for the part-time records lady to be made full-time, and the
Gun permit.
paying for that is coming out of the reserves in the gun permit. So we did look a little bit at the reserve funds that we have, where we can spend those. And so that should be not a hit on the budget, but will increase the records department a little bit. Part of that's to anticipation of the body camera, squad camera, and the extra data that we're going to have to process. There will be an increase on the workload on the records department with that, but we're able to, I think, absorb that through the gun permit funding and work with that. So with a lot of Kelly's help, went through and looked at some areas where we could cut in some line items. Again, some of that we can offset some of the equipment stuff with some of the reserve funding that's there as well. So overall, the increase is $273,301 down at the very bottom there. Thank you, Kelly. And of that, I think it's only 48,000 roughly that isn't in personnel. So part of the things that will be funded this year, as you know, is the body camera project. That's a $35,000 addition. And also we are helping to fund the drug task force has a criminal analyst that they're paying for. And so each of the member counties for the task force is helping to fund that position starting in 21. And that's about $6,200 that our county's putting in for that. I did also increase somewhat significantly the overtime budget. We tried to get a better handle on that with a full-time hire and traded out 2 part-timers last year, if you remember that. We did see some benefit from that, but unfortunately, when we're dealing with the sheriff's office and the way we have to hire and train people, there's always a huge lag on getting production out of that body, if you will. So the hiring process takes 2 to 3 months. And and once we do hire them, we have another 12 weeks of them riding with the deputy. So essentially you're paying 2 people in a squad car for a full 12 weeks to get them where they're able to start actually working on their own. So we, early on, with some stuff going on with our personnel, that increasing the overtime early on, while we were still in the FTO process, that we had to use a little more overtime than I hoped we would. So I increased that a little bit, again, just trying to be a little more realistic, and added 60,000 to that. And again, trying to make that a realistic number and hoping we can stay with that. So I'm sorry, Kelly, you're probably not keeping up with me very well in my conversation here. So those were kind of the big changes on that I think are realistic that we could go with. Not as detailed as Rod's. I don't have, Kelly did look at the vacancy management for me, and we're running in the 95 to 99% fill, so there wasn't a whole lot to look at there for savings or planning, because I do have to hire back every position that's open, and delaying those hires just tends to cost the overtime budget more. So I don't have, that I have seen, I don't have a whole lot of room for creativity on where we're at.
So Kelly, can you at some point
email this page to the commissioners, please?
Yep, absolutely.
I'm sorry, I thought you guys had that. That's my bad.
No, that's fine. We'll get it. So sorry to interrupt you, Jeff.
No, not at all. I'm actually ready for questions on that. Since you don't have it, my whole
I think
conversation
we
so far doesn't make sense.
Thanks, Jeff, and I know you were working on this with Kelly, and so you kind of answered one of my questions was the on-field positions, but if you've already ran that calculation and we're not, if there's no savings, there's no savings, I guess. So thanks for bringing preemptive on that.
Jeff?
Yeah.
How are we doing on retention with your new recruits that are coming in? Seems like it's pretty well.
It's been getting better, yes.
Yeah.
We are the hardest position is the part-timers because it's as I mentioned yesterday at personnel, it's either the young guys that want a full-time job and more hours and more stability as they look at the position that only getting promised part-time hours is not real attractive. The part-time or the full-timers that we have right now that are younger are pretty stable. Every time I ask people if they're leaving, they always deny it. So that's a good thing. Not that they would tell me, I'm sure, but it really does seem like we've got a pretty good core of people and the coworkers get along pretty good. And I think that's huge when you've got, that building within the department that people want to be here and they see it as a good place to work. So I think we've made good efforts and we're seeing the benefits to that. But I was talking to somebody yesterday and there's a lot of police jobs in general in the state right now. They were saying there were like 60 different openings, which is a lot when you start looking at the state and what's open. A lot of it towards the metro where the pay and benefits are higher. And so that does have a certain amount of attraction for some people that are not locked in here, if you will. So, but in general, I think we're doing a really good job. The staff is, huge in that and getting people here and building that good work environment. So,
yeah, I think that's kind of expected with your part-timers, but you may lose some full-timers too if there's that many openings out there, which is good that you have a part-time program then, because you're looking at people who could be moved up if we end up with a gap. So that's a good thing.
Right. And it's just hard to stay in front of that curve or that looks like. So
it's always going to be there.
Unfortunately. So
Mr. Chair, I got a question.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I had to step away for a couple minutes there, but I was on a phone call and we were actually just talking about this right now is like the sheriff's budget. And maybe I missed it or maybe kind of talked about it. And I don't know if Jeff could necessarily do it, but in conjunction with like Rod and Reese and even the courts, what we were talking about is there a way to figure out like when there's a traffic stop or a ticket issued, or I don't know where I'm trying to go with this or what I'm trying to do. Is there a way to figure out just across the board what that costs the county? So because you see it all the time, they're like, oh yeah, the police department's out there, they're just writing tickets to try to meet a quota or whatever type of thing to try to make money. Like people think the sheriff's department and the jail is a money making or venture, a business or something. But it'd be interesting to see how many violations are written a year and the budgets of all these, just to see what each citation costs the county. And I know like a DWI or a violent offense is different than a seatbelt violation or something, but I don't know, it'd be just nice to tell people, hey, every time they open up the book or however they write a ticket nowadays. I don't know how that works, but it cost us $1,000 or $10,000 or something, you know. I don't know if that's possible, but I just appreciate what you guys are doing, and it'd be nice to have just for my side, to have a little ammo to not, no pun intended there, but to shoot back type of thing. So.
Yeah, and that would be a hard one to put a number to. It's kind of, law enforcement's kind of unique in that you don't have a set task for the day, and you see your return on that investment for that deputy. Because, if they're not on a call, they're expected to be doing follow-up. If they're not doing follow-up, they're expected to be doing, being seen in the public and all of those kind of things that they're getting paid for, that may not look like work, if you will. Just stop, if you take even stopping for a coffee break, I get calls and we get feedback that, there were X number of deputies sitting at one place for 5 hours, and what are we getting for our money, and, and all of that kind of stuff. But then I get as many thank yous from that town that has that coffee shop in it, saying, hey, we saw deputies in the town. That was great. Tell them they can come in here and they can sit here as long as they want and be in our town. So you've got that, public perception kind of cuts both ways on, we want to see law enforcement on our corner to, we'd never want to see a cop. We'll deal with our own stuff. So it really is, depending on who you talk to, what good law enforcement looks like. And those same people don't realize the type of calls that this last weekend with Labor Day, we were running all weekend. We had the SWAT team out twice. We had, I think, 3 DOAs in our county. We had just all these kind of things that, unless you live in that neighborhood where the SWAT team is running around, you don't think we're doing anything, because all of our resources are tied up on one call. And we've got one deputy that shagging calls from north to south while that's going on. So again, not sounding, I don't want to make it sound like I'm whining or complaining, because it is the job. But at the same time, I don't know how you put a dollar amount to some of those contacts. And I know that's a long answer, Josh, sorry.
Yeah, no, and I didn't, I don't have a good way to word it either. I mean, I don't
Right.
know if you just simply took, we wrote out this many citations this year, and your budget, the jail budget, the county attorney's budget, the courts, and the probation, everything to do with public safety. This is what it costs. And just, like I said, just put it would be, I think it would blow all our minds away. If nobody did any crime, you would love to not have your job, type of thing. But that's not realistic. And like I said, I think everybody around here would like to see more law enforcement, and it's kind of that happy medium. And we've talked about this before, because obviously you would like to have more law enforcement too. But, it up this area, people like to see police officers, and we like our sheriff's department, and we like our sheriff and all our deputies. So I appreciate what you've been doing. And I know, especially this time, what's going on, it's hard, but hopefully you're getting some backing, and me as a commissioner, I'm here to try to help you as much as I can too. So.
And I appreciate that. I felt nothing but support from the board, so I do appreciate that over the years. And our community, I think, is on the positive side of that as well. I think way more thank yous than we have pushback. So I think we're in a really good spot in Pine County. Which, talking about budget, I'm hoping there's not a whole lot of change other than looking ahead in the next few years and trying to move ahead that way. So this year is fairly static on my side. It's just we're trying to maintain.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
and Commissioner Moore, I don't know if this gets to your question a different way or not, but we have more costs that are attributed or that are attributable to the sheriff's operations that are not in the sheriff's budget than we get in ticket revenue. And so vehicles don't show up in the sheriff's budget, they're in highway. Workers' comp insurance doesn't show up in the sheriff's budget, it's in the 801 in the general fund. And there's one more big cost that I'm blanking on that doesn't, facility costs, you know, do not show up. So just on the things that don't show up in the sheriff's budget, the ticket revenue doesn't come close to those. If you look at what is in the sheriff's budget, there's a net of about $3.5 million and a revenue of $1.2 million. And I don't know if Kelly has that number or not, but most of those revenues are state reimbursements, like with para-police aid, their contracts with the cities, there's a donation from the Mille Lacs Band. And so the ticket revenue is really a very small piece of what the revenues are. And I mean, I think philosophically, there's nobody here who thinks we should be funding the public safety department from, you know, ticket fees, right? But even if that was our goal, I don't know that you could accomplish that.
No. And, you know, if I could add, when the public calls 911, they expect an officer to be there in Pine County. It's always been that way. And our people, as a general rule, 98% of them don't call 911 unless there is a problem. You know, we get some, I'm sure Jeff could say that too, you know, silly calls, but most of the time it's something's going on. And the other part of that is it's a huge county. So it takes manpower in a big county because you're so spread out. And to add to what Jeff was saying, like on a weekend, a holiday weekend, you know, police work is mundane work, a percentage, and then the other percentage is chaos, because it never fails that 20 emergencies are happening at one time on a busy weekend, and you don't have the staff. So it's just the nature of the beast. And then the other percentage of the time, you have plenty of officers to handle everything. You know, you just can't staff for one weekend. That's crazy. It just ends up a busy weekend or a stretch of days. So anyway, Jeff, yes, I hear the same thing in the public when you make your comments about positive. I hear so much positive with the county attorney's office and the sheriff's office that it just amazes me how much I hear that. So that's good to hear.
It is. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, any other questions on 201, the main budget for me? And I didn't mention in my earlier one, so all the contracted policing that we do, basically that increased 3% across the board. So our town contracts are going up 3%. Our SRO, school resource officers, are going up 3%, with the understanding that if the schools shut down and don't reopen, we're going to have to revisit that if they're not getting services because they don't need them. So those are, again, unknown as far as the SRO positions. It's not a huge amount. They're paying, you know, a percentage of a deputy, if you will. But it is something that might change that we can't control. Any other questions on the 201? Hearing none, I'll move on. So the other ones that fall under we've got 205, 206, 208 that are all grant funded ATV boat type positions. And we've talked about that before, where it's essentially money in, money out. The grants basically pay for the man hours that we get to put out on the trails in the water, and also some equipment. So basically, those are a wash, and we'll spend what we get, if you will. The other one is K9. I have asked for a $10,000 budget on that again to stay the same as we've asked for before. With K9s, we get a fair amount of donations and income to maintain that program. Really good community support that's jumped in there. So I don't know that we've ever really gotten into the budget spending. It's been mostly the income that we've spent on that. But I do want to keep that $10,000 in there if we can, to make sure that we have a plan if something does drastically change there. It's something I think we need to maintain, and it's been a great program to have. So I would like that not to change as well. Any questions on any of those grant or the K9 positions?
Question as far as grants.
Okay.
And it's a little off, but with your Sheriff's Association and what other groups you go to and meet, and this question is going to pertain to our EMS funding for the region, the East Central region, and the training for, you know, your first responders out in the rural areas, which I know you depend on, and I always did when I was working. But, you know, all the funding is coming from the seatbelt violations, and as a general rule, everybody's so compliant that funding has been falling off at a pretty steep decline for the last, you know, 5 to 10 years. So my question is, at your meetings, do your sheriff officials and whoever, do they talk about that? And is a way we can, what other statute we could attach a surcharge to instead of the seatbelt? Like inattentive driving or something like that is a funding stream for the training and supplies for our rural small departments.
Yeah, that one hasn't come up, so I don't have a good answer on that.
You do me a favor and bring it up at your next big meeting, because I'm getting letters from, like, up in Carrick, you know, they need supplies, you know, sleds and, you know, for rescues out on that trail out in the Nemadji, and I'm sure you know about it. It's just, I don't know how it's those small groups, just training is expensive for them. So,
Right.
anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Okay. I'll certainly throw that out there. All right, so if there's no questions on that, I should talk about the emergency management a little bit. That one is 281, right?
281.
It's the 281 budget, and I don't think I've mentioned Denise is in here with me as well, so she'll be able to fill in some of my gaps with information. So in the 281, we do take part of my salary and wages, Denise's salary and wages, and Paul's. So we have three of us that are putting a percentage of our rate in there to show that the county is funding it, and that helps to justify the grant that we get for that as well. So
It's a soft match.
so it's the county's match to the grant, and again, that one's kind of is what it is as far as what we can get out of that and how we spend it. So there's not a whole lot of change in that. I just want to make sure you guys are aware that the county does throw some funds into that, and it runs through there. Did you have anything else, Denise?
This is Denise. Basically, instead of coming out of the 201, it slid over to the 281, and it has for a number of years now. And yeah, the soft match. Basically, that's it. It's just a soft match for us. So, and the grant itself is around. We never get the funds secured until about this time during the year. So September, October. Even though the grant starts on January 1, it's just how the state runs runs this particular grant.
So
Yeah, that's
the-
always hard to get our mind around that we're spending money we don't have yet and then promises that it'll be there. So sorry, Dave.
So the amount of the grant is that $21,000?
It's generally around there. It's come down, it's been up to 22 before and down to 20 with some change. So it's generally around that figure.
Thank you.
Denise, one question that I have for Sheriff. This is Kelly. The grant expenditures line, what type of things are paid out of that?
It's generally equipment that we use in our emergency operations center for both for the north and the south EOC. Basically, everyone in the region, in our northeast region, has upgraded their emergency operations center, and for a good point. We've had how many declarations just in our county alone, including this year, of course, and just to get to the point where we have the communications, the radio operations, and all that to a point where we can actually function out of it. So we've been building on that for a few years now. Like I said, both with down here, which our training room here at the south, the jail training room is our emergency operations center for the south, and our north office in Sandstone is our EOC for the north. And we also, just to add in there, we also have, for some search and rescue operations, light towers, generators, things like that, that we've used numerous times, have also been paid through the EMPG.
Any other questions on that or more details? Hearing none. So gun permits, 210. We can touch on that a little bit. So again, we've been spending down the funds in there. We do have a pretty significant fund balance in there. That's on there. Restricted fund was at about 142,000. And from what I've seen on funding, it is a fairly restricted fund balance. So what we can spend it on, we have to be careful with that it applies to the gun permits. So this year, what I had touched on earlier was would like to add half-time hours, if you will, to our part-time and make her full-time, which would add some to the benefit line, of course. But in looking at the last 3 years, we get about a $45,000 income. This year will be a lot higher with a presidential election and the unrest. Our gun permit to carry numbers and purchase. So the ones that pay are the permit to carry. Permits to purchase are free. So I'll talk more about the carry than the free ones, since that's where the money exchanges hands. So that number has gone up a lot. And again, the presidential election, just the general unrest, there's been a pretty good increase this year, which we don't expect to stick around next year. So it's roughly about a $45,000 for the last 3 years of income. My proposed changes in that would start to slowly take down that fund balance. I don't want to take it all out at once. And so we would spend down about $20,000 out of that fund balance per year with the staffing increase. And then, there could be another $5,000 roughly in equipment that might have to come out of there, depending on our supplies and our card printers that we have to buy to print the cards. So that's the plan with that. The fund balance is to put it into that staffing, which is pretty easy to justify. And the county in general sees the benefit of, like I said earlier, with the extra potential for data needing to be processed through our office as well. Any questions on that one?
Yeah, Jeff. So how many gun permits are in Pine County, right? Because they're good for 5 years. Is that correct?
Yeah. I don't have the actual number in front of me. But every year I have to go through on an annual basis and review all those as well. So it's not, once we issue it, it's not free to the county anymore. It really does take a fair amount of my time also to touch those every year to make sure people haven't gotten something that would disqualify them. And I don't have the number in front of me, sorry.
Just out of personal curiosity, it would be interesting to know that number between, and if you get a permit to buy, how long is that good for?
So a permit to purchase is good for a year.
Okay. And it'd just be good to know of all the adults in Pine County, what percentage have a carry permit, or it'd just
Right.
be interesting.
So I can tell you, I found some of the paperwork here. So I can tell you in 2019, there were 273 new permits, and then renewals come in after that, or in those as well. So there was 141 renewals, and then if there's a late fee on those, there was 36 of those. So you've got two. So in 19, we issued approximately 500.
Okay.
If you go back to 17, like I said, it was a little bit down, and 18 was a little bit up. So this year, again, I think we're on a pretty good pace to beat that. So I think if you figure roughly 500 or so get processed on any given year, would be a pretty good estimate.
So we probably got 2,500 people. I don't know how many adults there are, 10,000. Kelly, do you know off the top of your head?
I know there's like 16,000 registered voters.
Okay.
This
All
is
right.
just, I do want to point out too that it's not just Pine County residents. We do have a lot of Wisconsin residents that have their permits here too. So.
Yeah, and that's a good point. So out-of-state people can apply in the county, so we do get a lot of the Wisconsin on the border stuff, so.
Oh, all right. Thank you.
Yes. Any other questions on the gun permit stuff? I think that covers everything but dispatch, so I will turn it over to Denise.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Kelly, if you'd be willing to hop over to 204.
Yep, I'm heading there.
That's awesome. Thank you. Alrighty, as soon as we can get that up, basically what we see, there's historically a trend that dispatch has always been a few percent under budget. To me, that's a good thing. Way under budget, of course, is meaning that we're short-staffed and we don't have the people that we should. This year's no exception. We actually had a lot of retirements and some people leave. And with COVID, of course, we delayed hiring. So our budget looks very under budget for this year. However, we're on a trend to staff better, and our staffing is being built up. And so with stabilizing the hiring, our budget will also stabilize. So although this year it looks good and that we're heading to be under budget again, at this time next year, I anticipate to be fully staffed and to keep it that way. So basically, I'm not asking for an increase, of course, but I'm also asking not to cut the budget at all. We are looking good because with the retirements and stuff, we have people that without the longevity here, we hire them with a step one. So that helps the budget. And so that's about it for dispatch. I know Melissa had just sent that out, so we're at I think about 52% for the end of August. With hiring 2 people on just in the last month, and now the hiring process is open again. However, we're losing another person to retirement at the end of November. I think pretty much we're right on track. So, do you guys have any questions for me?
I have a question.
Sure.
So I see, you have another retirement coming. Are you going to start the process ahead of that so the person's ready to just onboard?
We actually, we are in process right now. We have 2 people in training, which of course everybody knows what a toll that takes. So our trainees and trainers are set to train 30 hours a week. In a small dispatch center, it's kind of hard because you have to stagger them. You can't have them together. Your main hot calls that are coming in are generally certain hours of the day. So it takes a lot to plan and prepare for that. And we only have so many trainers that are available. So with 2 training right now, by the time this next process, which we're in the middle of, is ready to start, basically one of those that are training right now will be sitting in as a second, which is a partner. And then, so we start the process all over again with training. Training can take about 3 months or so. And so as of the first of the year, we will hopefully have those all 3 on board. So yeah, we're in process right now to cover that retirement.
Okay. And then, are we still I know we're text compliant through Duluth. Is that the way it still is, or does it come straight to us now?
No, it's definitely that way. That saves us, honestly. I know I brought this up quite a while ago, but if we had that equipment here, we'd be looking well over $30,000. And we pay basically a small fee under $2,000 a year to have that go through St. Louis County.
Oh,
So
okay.
we haven't gotten a handful of them. It's not like we thought it would be, or I don't think it's like anybody thought it would be. We hardly have any text to 911s. So
I don't think a lot of people know that that's even available service.
True. So another thing I do want to point out is that the uptick in calls are generally our calls that we get into the dispatch center are possibly around 3,400 a month. And I got the last count last week and we're at about over 4,600, 4,400. So over the past few months, it's ever increased. So, I know each year, it ebbs and flows with the seasons, of course, and we're always around 30,000 or so. If this continues, we're looking at almost 50,000 calls for the year. So, and that's not pulling an ICR number or pulling a case number. Those are calls actually into the dispatch center that somebody has to decide what to do with that, whether it's to call a deputy, call a state patrol, anything like that. So it's getting a little crazy.
Any follow-up questions on dispatch?
No, except that I couldn't do that job for 13 seconds. I've stood in there enough. But you do the math on 50,000 calls divided by 24 hours a day, that's And I know they don't all come in nice staggered intervals. That's a tremendous amount of pressure we put people under. Wow.
It is.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that. That's one job in law enforcement that I think I would fail miserably at. So I appreciate the work they do for sure.
I agree with Jeff. I always said I could never sit in that hot seat. I have one more question though, just because I can't remember. I thought at some point that our dispatchers had to be able to do or direct the CPR or life saving over the phone or while on a call. How are we doing on that process?
That's actually been scooted back a little bit. It's the EMD for the CPR. I know it's supposed to be coming due here in 2021. So we are still working with our EMS on basically getting that paid for. And moving forward with that. So, and it's not just the EMD over the phone where basically they read off the screen when that call comes in. We've had a number of calls where Alina has still helped us with that, and so we've transferred the call so they can walk them through certain, not just CPR, but certain aspects of medical dispatching. So they've been great for that, and that hasn't come at a cost to us. But I don't think that's going to last forever. So we are working towards that. At the same time, too, there are a couple trainings that I'm going to have the dispatchers doing, and that is actually in-house CPR first aid training. We've trained our record staff here. Of course, all of our guys are first responders, but here in office, you never know when you're going to need it. So, like I said, our dispatchers will be doing the same thing. So,
very good. Thank you.
Excellent. I do have the other side of the dispatch, the 227 account, which is basically the E911 grant. I just wanted to touch on that really, really quick. I don't know, Kelly, if you have that handy.
That would be the details on the gun permits.
Yes. There you go. Thank you very much. So basically, to touch briefly on the E911 grant, which a lot of our funding for the dispatch center actually comes out of this for equipment and how we run our 911 system. So each year, it looks like for the past few years, like we'll have an excess in there. I do want to point out that about every 3 years, we have a big money ticket item, like upgrading our higher ground system, which is our recording for our radio and our phone. So basically, this coming year will be the big ticket item that will bring that back down to, I shouldn't say zero, but darn close to it. So that's another thing too that we have to look at. And it was brought up that we have recording basically on the one channel for Pine Law 1 and our medical, which is Fire 1, and of course Fire. So encryption actually costs a lot of money to do. So that could be an idea to spend some of that money on, and to record Law 2. If I'm going in over somebody's head, I can explain it better, but basically, to get the equipment for this is about $70,000.
Get back so I can go off mute.
Denise?
Yes?
Oh,
I don't know if you're turning your head or something, but you're coming in and out. So if you can just be sure to speak into the mic.
Yep, I'm like 6 inches from it. So is that a little bit better?
Yep, you sound really good now.
Okay, I won't move. Okay, so I'm going to backtrack a little bit here. So basically, I'm just gonna say about every 3 years, we have a big ticket item that we have to purchase out of this funding. So each year it looks like we have a excess or a extra amount in there. But when our big ticket items come through, they're generally around $60,000 to $80,000. Either we're trying to do an upgrade for our 911 actual calling system, our recording system, which only records Pine Law 1 and Fire 1. A lot of times now, if you guys have heard people using Broadcastify or other apps on your phone that you can record or listen to, our Scannerland that can hear any police calls. It's becoming more and more, how do you say it, Sheriff? Basically, the bad guys are listening to it constantly, along with just our general public. It's becoming such a problem that we actually have caught people with that scanner app open as they're breaking into places or trying to flee from us. So what we're hoping to do eventually here is to either get Pine Law 2 recorded or get things encrypted. Now, encryption is very, very expensive. The radios have to be encrypted. All of our channels would have to be encrypted, which is a huge chunk of change. But for our public safety standpoint, I think that's the way that we need to head. Just for the fact that even the other day on one of our calls, basically the bad guy got away because they were listening to Scannerland. They know what way we're coming. They know where we're at. We can flip to Pine Law 2, but it's just a matter of time before that is also on these apps and Broadcastify where other people can listen to it. So encryption is about our only option. There's other counties out there that have it at a hefty price tag. And I don't think that's something that the E911 grant can handle, but it's something for down the road that I know that we need to take a look at. But anyway, so that's why I just wanted to point out on the 227 that when you see quote unquote the excess amount in there, like every 3 years, then it gets spent down. Those are the items that it's getting spent on. So, and like I said, this is a grant that basically $50,000 a month that we get from the state. So are there any questions on that?
What is the cost for an encrypted radio?
About $7,000.
Yeah, we don't have a solid dollar amount on that. We're still looking at the options. And part of the problem when you go to encryption, then you've got your partner agencies that need to be able to have radios that are capable of accepting those keys as well. So it's not just a matter of, oh, we're going to do one radio. It impacts a lot going out that we need to make sure we have a solid plan on. So we're going to work on getting that.
Okay, thank you.
And it is a different world, Matt, than you used to have a traffic stop and you knew if somebody had a scanner in their car because it was portable radio sitting on the seat with them. But now every cell phone's a scanner, so we do have to be aware that we're being listened to all the time on.
Yeah, that could be trouble. Are there any questions or comments for dispatch?
I think we've covered everything that falls under the sheriff umbrella, but if I miss something or if you have questions on any of the big picture stuff, let me know.
Very good. All right. I don't think anybody has any questions. I'm not hearing anything. Do you want to say thank you?
Thank you all.
Yep. David.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And we are going to start with IT, and Ryan is on the call. So he's going to present the IT budget. And there is some info in your packet by way of background.
Thank you, David. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Ryan Camille, IT manager, and I'm here to give an overview of the 2021 budget. I'm hoping you can see my budget now. Perfect. The IT department has three main spending areas for our budget: personnel, services and maintenance, and hardware and software. In previous budgets, these numbers have been around 33% for each of them. This year, the IT department added one full-time employee this fall that was not in the 2020 budget. And an overall decrease of projects for 2021 has moved this balance to 46% personnel, 32% services and maintenance, and 22% hardware and software. The main increases for 2021 budget are the one full-time employee in line item 6103 and the county contribution in line item in 6152, which accounts for an total increase of $91,327. For decreases in expenditures, compliance funds will help offset $15,400 in line item 6262. There's a decrease of $9,423 for maintenance in line item 6311, and a decrease of $66,000 in line item 6660. The IT department will be delaying computer replacements for the year 2021 with the intention of starting again in 2022. So overall, I'm presenting the 2021 budget of a net of $776,471, which is a decrease of $1,996 from the 2020 budget. As you can see, here's the breakdown by line item with the increases and decreases highlighted. And I just want to thank Administrator Minke and County Auditor Schroeder for their work of getting me to basically a decrease for our budget. I know we came in at initial was about 40,000 increase, but we worked really hard, sharpened the pencils, and have gotten that down to that. So projects for 2021 include the jail camera replacement, antivirus upgrades, and the potential start to the tax and CAMA project, which will be paid for by Kelly. So telework is a very large project, but it does not really impact our 2021 budget, which is why it's kind of left off of these slides. We've either paid for things in 2020 or we're able to use CARES Act funds to supplement those. And so I'm just going to skip to Fund 43 as well before we take questions on my budget. That is just the budgeted amount of $100,000, which is the same as last year. The jail camera project is slated for 2021. However, I believe we might be paying for that out of bond funds. And for 2022, we're looking at storage servers for the virtual infrastructure for the county, which will need to be replaced. So the current balance as of August 2020 for that fund is $195,000. However, it's basically zero after the initial purchase of the squad and body cameras for the Sheriff's Department. So that would leave us $100,000 total available in 2021. So that's just kind of a high-level overview of my department. Are there any questions? Perfect.
Yeah, nice. Thanks, Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
If no one has questions for Ryan. Okay. Move on.
Is everyone seeing the screen? All
Yes.
right. It's kind of odd. You watch people do this all the time, and then when you have to do it, it seems different. So this next portion includes a handful of budgets that are lumped together in administration. And then we'll end with probably the two most expensive ones, or the ones that we have more discretion over, which is the commissioner budget and the administrator budget. So there is central services, which really just accounts for the postage machine. It has zero net impact. It's not proposed for any change. The next one, the county board consultants. This is our labor attorney, Margaret Skelton, for the most part. We decreased that a couple of years ago to $30,000. We think that's still an adequate amount of money. Year to date, we've spent about $10,000. So we should make budget for 2020, and we would anticipate 30,000 would cover that for 2021. On the medical examiner, and I'll just keep running through these unless folks have questions, just interrupt me. We have a fixed rate contract with the Midwest Medical Examiner, so that is a $50,000 payment. And then there is the transportation cost, which varies a little bit. As you look at the end of July, we're trending a little bit high, but don't anticipate we need to make any changes for the 2021 budget. The library is proposing a 3% increase, which is pretty minor. And I think, Josh, you might have a little more insight, but I think their budget was pretty flat. But we got a little bit of an increase of $10,000, primarily because some changes in the usage formula, where we had a little more usage than some other jurisdictions. The Historical Society, they, I believe, did request an increase to $30,000. Our budget right now is holding them at $25,000. With them and the Ag Society, we do have some opportunities to work this year yet with the CARES Act funding and potentially get them some additional reimbursements. And so if we do that, that may be a way to help them in 2021 without giving an actual increase in the county appropriation. The Ag Society, maintaining their request at $10,000. Snake River Watershed Board, this $9,968 has been constant probably for a decade or more. For the Housing Authority, that $4,500 pays just for the per diems of the housing commissioners. And then this is our contribution to the Central Minnesota Initiative Fund. And we increased it to this amount. I think we were $7,000 pre about 2017, and then we increased it to $7,450, which is their request for 2021. And then we get into the commissioner budget. And if you look down at the very bottom right, you see that 2%, that's the overall increase. And then as you scroll up the percentage change column, you can see where there's a $1,000 increase in the telephone and a $5,200 increase in the insurance contribution, which are really the only changes in that budget. And I'll pause for an extra 2 seconds since this is your budget in case there's any thoughts or questions on it. And then the county administrator budget, if we start down in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see that's an 18% increase. And this ties primarily back to the staffing. And so we have increased with the addition of an HR generalist. And so if you scroll up, you see that 84% on the county contribution, and then 17% on the salaries and wages. And so virtually all of the increase is on that new position. The actual, if I go to the next slide, I can show you that. So the total increase is 18%. In this budget, 96% of the costs are personnel, and it does reduce the non-personnel costs by 12%, but relatively inconsequential because of the staffing costs. And then I just listed the positions that are in the budget. Any thoughts, questions on the budget? On the staff, and one of the reasons. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Steve.
It took me a while to find my mute button again here, but anyway, if I could back up to the labor attorney, it just struck me that I can remember when that budgeted item was $165,000. And so I think it's worth noting that as we've added HR people, we think of that as just an additional cost, but some of that reason that we've been able to lower our labor attorney is number one, we took negotiations on ourselves, and number two, we are able to do with the HR people we have stuff that keeps us out of trouble, so we're not having to hire a labor attorney.
Steve, that is very accurate. And having the HR staff that we do, we have more frequent conversations with the business agents, and we're not always going to be in agreement with them, but having good conversation with them helps us in the long run. And I think if you talk to the department heads, especially Becky and Kelly, who have a lot of employees who are represented, they would echo that sentiment. And then the other point on the HR costs, we are planning to evaluate leaving the Minnesota merit system. And if we are successful at that, that would not be effective until 2022. But once that is effective, that would save $20,000 plus in Becky's budget, but it would rely more on our internal HR staff.
David, with the staff we have now, though, we are pretty confident we can handle any additional workload the merit staff, the merit system. It's going to be kind of transparent. Correct?
Yes, and you're not able to see, but Jackie is on the video shaking her head.
Okay.
So good question though. I think that HR has demonstrated the value to the organization. And you heard when we were considering adding the HR generalist position, you heard from department heads the value that HR was adding, and also the value that IT was adding, because we added a position in each of those departments. And in hindsight, I think those are proving as good choices and helping the organization. But clearly they're expensive choices, and it's a very tough year to be dealing with those. But they present as they are, and they are expensive.
Yeah, but I think we've made a conscious decision that it's kind of like preventive medicine, I think. So I'm happy with the direction we're going. Thank you.
Okay, any questions or comment for David on administration, or Ryan in there too, if you want? So hearing none, I suppose we'll move on to general budget discussion, if anybody has any, or direction. I don't know, Dave, do you want to lead that off? Or
I do, and I'm going to share my screen, and it's only got a few numbers on it. I'm sharing the wrong screen.
I see some numbers though.
That was more numbers than I intended. Let me get out of that and try it again. That's not the one. This is so odd. Oh. What are you seeing now?
We're seeing deficit, highway levy, total.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, this is the one I want to share. Sorry. So Kelly, you can maybe make sure that I've got the right number. That number showing as the 1,288,754 is the latest general fund deficit. Is that correct?
That is correct. That does not include any changes, Brock's thought, or not Brock, with Rod's thought to change how we're budgeting the salaries. So there's a potential for an additional $179,000 of savings in there if we only budgeted at 95%. And that does not include any changes to STS either.
And how does that treat the levy for the technology fund? Is that at 0 or is that at 100,000?
That's at 100,000.
Okay, and so based on doing the camera system with the bonds, that levy could likely be reduced without a 2021 impact?
Yes, it just is scary when we get to 2022 or 2023 when we need that 100,000 back.
Okay, so anyways, getting back to that 1.2 million, that is the current deficit that we need to work to close. Then that next line, that 50,000 highway levy, that's just to factor in that Mark had requested an increase of $50,000. And so we need to be sure we keep that in our arithmetic. And so that means with no levy increase, our total deficit would be 1.3 million. At a 3% levy, that would generate $580,000, which would give us a revised deficit of $758,000. So I'm just trying to put into context kind of the gap that we would have, and we could make other assumptions and start to chip away at that number. But is that helpful for conversation?
Very much so.
Yes.
Very much helpful, David. I can get my arms around those numbers now. If we, Kelly and David, if you took the assumption that Rod may take, we might take with the jail with the 95% payout for salaries. If we did that countywide, is that number follow that trend, or are we at 99% already? You know what I mean?
Yes.
That it wouldn't work countywide.
Yeah, it works in the jail because there's a lot of employees and there's a predictable turnover rate. In Health and Human Services, for example, even if we did that exercise, it wouldn't help the deficit that we're working on. And so that's a significant number of people that are kind of, for this purpose or for the discussion here, are off the table. And I think in the sheriff's presentation, just looking at the year-to-date numbers that run in the sheriff's office, you wouldn't see that same savings. And I think Jeff made that same conclusion as well. So there might be a little bit of room to look at that, but it's probably not the big number that the jail got, except in the jail.
Okay. All right. I'm looking for any more easy fixes.
Yeah.
I know you guys have been thinking about them for a long time, but thank you.
The other number that we don't have nailed down yet, but that will come into play is in 2020, we are getting some CARES Act funds that are going to pay for some things in 2020 that are going to create savings in 2020. Some of those savings can be rolled forward so that we can spend so that we can spend reserve funding in 2021 without impacting our long-term reserves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, if we can get a warm fuzzy, David, that money is really coming, I don't have an issue with that. You know, I don't know if somebody sends a letter and says this money is earmarked and coming your way, or I give you my Boy Scout honor that it's coming or something.
We actually have the money, Steve. We have that $3.6 million literally in the bank for the CARES Act. And so.
But don't we have to send it back if we don't spend it by the end of the year?
Yes. And so that's why our goal is to spend it.
Right.
And so we'll have some.
I follow you now, David. I was having a North Dakota minute here.
Oh, that's understandable given your location. So on next Tuesday's board meeting, we're going to have an update that shows some of that spending that we believe we've already done for the county. And we still have a lot that we have to capture yet. But I'm confident that we'll get a fair amount of it captured, and that some of that will be bona fide savings that we can roll forward into 2021. And some of it won't be, right? A lot of it will be one-time money we paid for plexiglass, or we paid for, things that those are just expenditures that are not going to impact 2021.
Well, Kelly sent out a sheet yesterday with some projected increases, and I really appreciate that, Kelly. And it really helps. It looks like our small businesses will do fine. The people I get concerned about are the people that live in the same house they've lived in for 20 or 30 years. And because people are selling houses down the street from them, all of a sudden their house value goes up, and they haven't done anything except still live there. But of course it raises their taxes. And so,
and I can share, Steve, I can share that document.
Okay.
So while you're speaking of it, so everyone can look at it.
I just like that because it
went
puts
away,
real
David.
people.
David, you got the wrong thing shared.
I'm seeing your email, Dave.
Oh, I think I know what I did. Is that better?
Yes. Kelly, what was our tax rate last year when we?
65.193%.
There, I see it. Yep. Okay. It was right there.
So you can do like a 7% levy and keep the tax rate the same.
Man, that just shows how much valuations went up and new stuff, huh?
Correct. So the new construction was only the new construction is a big number, but yet it's only about 0.9%. So I mean, you see the new tax rates staying so low just because the values went up so much.
It's interesting.
I always think those are so interesting because it helps me explain to people how complicated, and I'm certainly not a property tax expert, but I know enough to know that it's complicated enough that it, if we could tell people we're only gonna have a 1 or a 3% or whatever increase, And then right away they think in their minds, okay, 1% I can handle that, 3% I can handle that. And then they get their stacked tax statement and it's way more than that. It has nothing to do with all the jurisdictions. It has to do with, did the commercial rate go up? Did the ag rate go down? Did it, whatever, you know, it's complicated. Did they add another classification, Kelly, or are we still at 50?
Well, over the last couple of years, we've gotten to 59.
59?
But since the legislature can't pass anything, we stay at 59.
Okay, all right.
Well,
Okay.
I have a comment, just to keep this conversation going. Sorry, Steve, if I stepped on you. So we're still looking at a $760,000 gap. There's no way you're going to recover some of that in reimbursement on stuff we spent on CARES Act dollars. So we have some kind of work to do.
We have a 700,000 gap if we have a 3% increase. Correct?
Yes.
That's after a 3% increase.
Right.
It would take a 7 to balance.
Yeah.
So if we do Rod's 95% though, then that brings it down another 180,000.
So that's 1%.
So we're getting a little closer. Another thing which, Dave, maybe when you asked about the technology fund, oh, yep, so the tech fund you have in there, we haven't addressed the building fund at all? The building fund's at that 75,000 currently?
That
75.
That was my question. If we're gonna do roofs and stuff on buildings, you know, do we cut that building fund down?
Yeah, so Steve, you can't see this, but we've got the spreadsheet up. And if you take the 179 for the jail, the 100 for the tech fund, and the 75 for the building fund, the deficit is down to like 400,000.
Yeah, and then what's that CARES Act number going to be? When will we know that?
I'm way more comfortable at you know, if we got all done with this and we said we can't cut it one more nickel, we're down to 3%. I can live with that. You know, by the time you do a bunch of calculation on CARES Acts and you take out some technology money and funding in the jail, and it'd be fun to see how close we are to that.
So, Steve, I just threw in a number of $250,000 for the CARES Act, not knowing if that's accurate or not. But if you do that, then you're down to 155,000. If we do negotiations and we get anything less than a 2.9% for a COLA, that will have a significant impact in this number too.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And we could do better than that number in insurance.
Mm.
I mean,
which number are you talking about, Steve?
To balance our budget, if we took the self-insured United Healthcare plan, we would solve that last 150,000. plus some?
Well, anything we save there is what we're gonna use to fund the insurance.
Yeah, but we got a number plugged in for health insurance in our budget already,
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, and
you
that,
know?
that number is
so if we plug in-
10%.
Yeah. So if we went with resources at 13 whatever, then we got to find some more money. If we went with United Healthcare, we're almost there, or we are there, I think. It's just all those things help me make my mind up for a lot of things, because I would rather have people have different health insurance cards, even though I know how hard it is, than to have to lay somebody up in which department do we do that, or 2 people or 3 people or whatever.
So on the one hand, the conversation today is very helpful in that I think that deficit is getting more manageable if there's a 3% levy increase on the table. If, and in deference to Commissioner Chafee, who's not here, the difference between 2.9% and 3% is pretty insignificant if it needed to be under 3, right? But if there's a levy in that range, then the deficit becomes pretty manageable. And we don't know how negotiations are going to turn out, but we ought to expect that we can negotiate something less than 2.9% on the whole, right? I don't know that number is 0, but there's a lot of room between 0 and 2.9% that it could come out at.
Yes.
And be very helpful.
Yes, I feel just a lot better. I today after this than I did the very first day we got done.
So we have our
thank you,
first
everybody.
Kelly, were you going to say something? So I'm just wondering, as far as a comfort level for commissioners as to our next steps, right? We have until literally the end of the year to set the final levy and balance the budget. We have until September 30th to adopt the preliminary levy, with the caveat that you can always go down, you can't go up, but we don't want it higher than it needs to be because that's the tax statement that people will get. We have negotiations tomorrow with HHS and the courthouse. And then we have a regular meeting on the 15th where we can talk more about budget and update all commissioners on negotiations and set the preliminary levy there, or we can call a special meeting sometime before the end of the month to set the special levy or the preliminary levy. So I'm just curious, are there thoughts on how you want to proceed or timing with the next meetings to get us to a vote on the preliminary levy?
Nobody's speaking up. Well, I think we have to. Right now,
Can we?
Go ahead, Steve.
I was just wondering. I can't remember when Steve is coming back. Chafee.
Yeah.
The 21st. So we could do something on the 22nd, maybe after technology committee, or on the 29th, if we were sticking to Tuesdays.
I I hate to run it out to the last day, but if staff thinks they're going to need an extra week, I mean, I would certainly think that's okay. I would rather, you know, if you need more time, I'd rather take more time than to just throw something together that's thrown together. We have never, you know, we've worked on pretty realistic numbers all the time. So I don't know, David, what do you feel more comfortable with, the 22nd or the 29th?
I don't have, as long as everybody is comfortable with the things we've talked about, right? I don't think there's
Yeah.
any reason that you couldn't do the 22nd to set the preliminary levy and set it at a number that is close to 3%, right? If you want to come in at 1.5% or something, you know, way lower than 3%, then I think it'd be helpful if we knew that today. But if there's a sense that you're agreeable to the changes that I had thrown up on the spreadsheet that get us down to a pretty manageable number, we'll have negotiations tomorrow. We'll maybe get a sense for updating the COLA after those negotiations to something other than 2.9%. And I suspect that that will take care of the rest of that gap.
David.
And the 20, yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Well, I just have to, I think every commissioner would like to see zero, you know, just for the, you know, that's what they would like. But our personnel costs are the driver on this thing. And I think we're locked in on contracts, except for a little bit we can save that are pending. So I think 3% is where we have to be, unless we start laying people off.
Yeah,
and I look at those sheets. 3% isn't making anybody's taxes go through the roof, you know. And I realize we're only part of the whole picture because schools and townships and cities need to get in there and do some thinking. So, but yeah, I mean, for right now, I'm happy with that, but I'm only one guy.
No, I like to have some time to think about it and chew on it, but
yeah, I think we can do that, can't we, David? Chew on it till.
Oh.
I mean,
Yeah, we can have discussion on the 15th, next Tuesday, and
Yep.
you can decide, you know, if you want to meet on the 22nd or the 29th.
yeah.
Or if you want
That makes, yeah. Let's do that.
Yeah, and I guess my only request is that if you don't think you're going to be close to 3%, right? If you think you're going to be closer to 0 or 1%, then if we knew that today, that would be helpful. But if it looks like
I understand that.
yeah,
if it looks like a number close to 3% is going to be palatable, then we could have a good conversation on the 15th. We could have some updated numbers based on what we heard today from Rod and others, and based on making some assumptions on the COLA. And it did dawn on me during this conversation that we are settled with correction officers. That's a significant percentage of the general fund employees. So we're probably not going to get off the 2.9% for them. It's probably going to be very helpful in Becky's budget, but she is planning to spend reserves, which is maybe okay, but if she didn't have to spend those, that's a way better budget. And then in the general fund, we will still have a lot of non-correction officer and dispatch employees. And so we'll just have to see what kind of a magnitude that is.
Did you lock the
but it might trim, if wages came down, it might trim that $50,000 that Mark needs for highway. You know, does that become $40,000? So it might.
And David, yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what insurance package we determine is going to change our contribution more than a little bit, isn't it?
Yes, but I think I don't know.
The fixed cost part is what will change, right?
Yeah, but we have
Yeah.
So we have 10% in the budget. So
Yeah.
we have an existing contract that will pay 70% of the increase in the family. And we will pay the first 6% in the increase in the single and then split it after that. So if the increase is 10%, we take the first 6 and then we split the remaining 4. So we should have 8%. But how to know how much to translate those percentages into actual, here's the total, is a very complex process.
I got you.
And it really hinges on which coverage people choose.
Where I was going, David, it would help me make up my mind which package is the best to go with. If there was, if that was the difference maker in the budget.
Yeah.
You know, if staying with Blue Cross through resources versus self-insurance with United Healthcare was a 1% difference, to me that would make it a slam dunk of what to do. I think eventually it's going to be at least a 1% difference, maybe, but not because we can't predict where we're going to end up with costs. We have to have money, so we can build up a reserve there. And anyway.
Yeah, that's Steve. I really get what you're saying, but for me, at least the way I understand that insurance is the savings we do get if we go to that is we need to tuck that to the side to fund the next year. So
I have to think that I have to talk myself through some of these things so I can get to the point where they don't make sense. But I got it.
Justin is on tap to be presenting at the meeting on the 15th. And so it will be a significant meeting with regard to understanding the insurance costs and then using that to make some decisions going into the budget. And so you'll see Justin present a number for United Healthcare self-insurance of an 11.62% increase. And that's the least expensive option. And the resources and training co-op renewal is a 13.5% increase. And the Blue Cross self-insurance is a 13.5% increase.
Big difference there, huh?
Yeah. So, I mean, in reality, the United Healthcare self-insurance is probably the best number we're going to get. And at 11.6% increase, that is doing a reasonable job of funding that risk that we assume through self-insurance.
Yeah. And we have to tie that all together because I know we have employees that are scared of change, but change is inevitable. you know, whether we initiate it or not, and we have to balance a budget, and people can argue about things that we chose to cut or not cut in order to do something different, but we're the five guys that have to make the decision.
Yes, that's pretty well said. So David,
who's typing
did you
there?
say, oh, David, did you say that there was enough in that 11 point whatever that builds in the fixed costs are in there, that savings, so that at that rate?
Yes.
So we would gain a percentage there, or at least save a percentage. Almost two probably.
Yeah, and one of the, I mean, theoretically, you could go self-insured and fund it at such a low level that you have no protection for your risk, but your numbers will look really pretty. But we know that's like budgeting jail revenues at $1 million.
Right.
It's not going to happen. So
we're not going to do that.
Yeah. And maybe that's the challenging part about the self-insurance is you have some discretion to manage the risk, and you have to manage it so that it's funded in essence forever, right? You can't take a short-term approach and say, well, I only need insurance for 4 more years, so I'm going to fund it so that it goes bankrupt in 4 years. You have to fund it assuming that it's going to be here forever.
Yes, and you certainly don't want the fund that's protecting that insurance to be used to balance a budget. It's there for the insurance.
And we have said that from the get-go. I mean, we at some point would like to put less money in there so that instead of funding it at 10 and 13%, we're funding it at 6% because that's our, or 6 or 7, because that's our traditional, that's really what the average has been, trying to get away from the peaks and valleys.
Yes, we could get there after a few years. Yep, right.
Yeah, but it's like buying squad cars. We could balance this budget today by telling Mark not to order any squad cars next year. You know, so what's that get us? Gets us in a lot of trouble next year or the year after.
It would double it.
I mean, we did that at one point in our life. That, you know. Or we could sell more land or more timber. Did that too. And it never happened.
You'd hope with lumber prices that our stumpage rates would go higher.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, well.
You'll get a bunch of insurance info in your packet for Tuesday's meeting, so you'll have a lot to chew on.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yep.
David,
Is there
Kelly,
any?
and everybody that's still on the call that presented. It was awesome.
Yeah. Any other business? Okay. I think we'll adjourn. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks you,
everyone.
Matt.
And Debbie.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Thanks for
Bye.
catching Chafee. I didn't. Thank you for that.